The biggest World of Warcraft rivalry on the market today appears not to be between classic MOP and retail WoW, but instead it appears to be between Turtle WoW and Project Epoch. I already did a little bit of a video about Turtle WoW, and that one elicited quite a response from the Project Epoch crowd. So I thought, you know what, I have to give this Project Epoch thing a try, and I did. Project Epoch is, if you don't know, it's a Classic Plus server that runs in the 3.35 version of World of Warcraft, which is the Wrath of Lich King version. It adds 8 new race class combinations, some of which actually overlap with the ones that Turtle WoW adds. Others are different. For example, there are Dwarf Shamans now and Undead Paladins, which is something that Turtle WoW shies away from, giving Alliance that Shaman and Horde that Paladin. They do it on Project Epoch, and I think it's fair enough. Some of the other race class combinations I don't really agree with in terms of, well, I'm not really interested in the lore personally, but it just feels weird to me seeing a Tauren priest. I can't explain why. Stuff like that kind of makes me feel like this is a more modern interpretation of what Classic Plus could look like, whereas Turtle WoW kind of feels like a more age-appropriate, like a more appropriate recreation to what Classic Plus might have looked like had they gone into that direction instead of the Burning Crusade back in 2006. Both things are fair. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just simply observing here that, this seems a little bit to be the different approaches in terms of game design. There are new starting areas for the gnomes and the trolls in Project Epoch. I think they fit very well. I think they're very well made. In general, all the content I've seen of Project Epoch that's custom seems super, super polished. It's very nice to look at. The mob placement is great. The spacing is great. I cannot complain about that one bit. I think they also were very smart in adding a lot of mobs to the new starting zones that they created. The troll and the gnome areas do have a lot of mobs in them, but that's probably also because of the server launches and them realizing that there's a whole heck of a lot of people playing. So there's an abundance of mobs in the starting zones, at least for the new custom ones, and that's something that I applaud. However, I will say that the TBC talents that the Project Epoch server runs on the surface, you might think that they're doing the job, but if you have played the TBC remake in, 2020, 2021, I don't know. Back in the day when they remade TBC and everybody was playing it for like 2 weeks until they realized that TBC actually kind of sucks besides Karazhan and there's not much to do and it's very unfriendly for alts, because you have to grind all the reputation, but that's not the point anyhow. The point is that the TBC talents on the surface do a lot to kind of round off their classes, but they don't go far enough. Like most classes would actually come into their own with Wrath of the Lich King, which is also why that was one of the most popular expansions the game has ever seen. Classes feel great in Wrath of the Lich King and they play awesome. TBC had glimmers of that, but some classes still felt like very lackluster, very limited in what their class fantasy could actually achieve. And Turtle WoW doesn't go with that. Turtle WoW has custom talents as opposed to Project Epoch. The talents are absolutely custom. You have the normal amount of talent points and, the trees are changed totally, which I think is really cool because it makes for a fresh meta and not for, an already existing meta with some custom talents that change a little bit of stuff around. But all in all, it's a TBC meta in a classic world. And the thing about that also is that I've seen people complain, and I've personally experienced that it feels very easy, at least the leveling. I have one character at 20 now and rolled a couple others just to, see the new areas, see the new zones, and get a feel for the whole thing. But it feels super, super easy. It feels like very, very stompy, not highly engaging in terms of that. Also, from the hardcore side of things, I see very, very few people running with hardcore mode. There seems to be a lot more people doing the Explorer's contract, which is kind of like an elevated turtle mode. Turtle mode or slow and steady on Turtle WoW actually would be giving you 50% fewer experience from monster kills. But the Explorer's contract on Project Epoch halves your experience gain on everything except exploration and also dungeons. It really puts an emphasis on kind of exploring the world and doing as much of the custom new content as possible. And that's what a lot of people seem to enjoy. Population-wise, there's about 5,000 people from what I saw last night on the main PvE server. There are about 2,000 people on Menethil, which is the second server they opened up, PvE, and then there's also a PvP server, which honestly I haven't checked the population numbers for. With all the cool new stuff Project Epoch adds, like accelerated day and night cycle that affects the monsters you can find, tons of new rare mobs, new world bosses, and all the new custom content in the new zones. The biggest thing that Project Epoch has going for it at this very second is the 3.35 client. The fact that the game runs very, very smoothly and also stably compared to Turtle WoW, which runs on the 1.12 client. This client is just really, really clunky. It's a deal breaker for some people, understandably, that are not used to it and that are not trying to see that kind of, gameplay in 2025, which is a little bit choppy. It's rough around the edges. You need a lot of add-ons for a lot of stuff. Some macros don't work the way you would think. It's pretty counterintuitive for modern standards. And if that's a deal breaker for you, then you will enjoy Project Epoch more, no matter the other factors, which is perfectly fine. But at this moment in time, I would say it's fair to argue that Turtle WoW benefits from the head start it has. It's been around a lot longer than Project Epoch, and thus it's a lot more of a complete experience and also a lot more of a convincing experience in this somewhat faithful Classic Plus recreation that, even though it has entirely custom talents, all of those talents feel a lot more appropriate to Classic WoW than those TBC talents do. I don't know, it's just kind of weird seeing a Warrior Blade Storm in Classic. The power level of a lot of these abilities feels a bit beyond what you would be expecting to see in Classic WoW, if that makes any sense. But it's also a very, very subjective opinion, of course. So you might see that differently. I don't know. I'm just not trying to see Torrent Priests, all right? That's it. That's all I have to say. I'm a hater of Torrent Priests. I'm glad there are no Torrent Paladins. But, if you're gonna make some of those changes, then you might as well give them Torrent Paladins. It's like, okay, why can undeads, I'm going to walk you through this right here, all right? So they had undead priests in the base game. And then the argument used to be for the last 20 years, it used to be like, oh yeah, if there's undead priests, like why aren't there undead paladins? Like that's weird, right? You should be able to be an undead paladin. So they add undead paladins now, but then at the same time, they add torrent priests, which if you apply that same logic, then why are there no torrent paladins? It doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. It's not a big deal anyway. Like it's just one race class combination, one decision they made amongst like hundreds of over thousands of decisions that had to be made to bring Project Epoch to us. And honestly, most of it is pretty cool. Most of it is pretty fun. I think that, show it some love, wait for it to grow. It's only going to get better from here. And the technical basis of things, the 3.35 client is awesome to play on. It's such a joy compared to the 1.12. But if you're like me, maybe you miss the clunkiness of the old client, and maybe that's why you will return to Turtle WoW every now and then. It's possible to play both servers after all. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again really, really soon.